know that between February and March, in mainstream media, we have counted at least 15 cases of women that have been killed, often by their partners. I am afraid we're getting towards that point where it is normal, but it should not be normal.
I think that Women's Day is really all about just food, dancing, soulever le kaba.
They say, what are we eating for when we have something grave, on our plate? There was a time in this country where if you're a married woman, you could not travel out of the country without consent of your husband. How did that change? Who are the women who fought for this? And so Women's Day, even if you're Gen Z or you're millennial, what are we celebrating? Which progress are we celebrating?
What are some of the big problems that you really see women facing?
This worries me to know that women constantly have to choose between having a baby and having to work, even when if they choose having the baby, then they don't have the resources to raise the kids. Some men think that women belong to them and you can't say no, because what gives you that audacity that a woman is going through mache mokolo and you can just slap her butt?
People minimize some of these issues until it's too late.
People often teach you to be quiet. You don't punish a rapist by letting him marry the survivor.
A lot of young girls who are pushed into the idea that, you need a man with a Range Rover, or you need to cry in a private jet.
Whether you cry in a private jet or you cry on a bike, you're crying. It's pain. Yeah. And so this is a time for women to think about, what do we want?
And how do you think those problems could be fixed potentially?
There is we need to think about, things that last beyond the 9th of March. But you may say, you don't need to be a woman to decide for women. You need to be a woman sometimes to understand certain things. I give you an example.
Your husband should check your phone and make sure that you're controlled effectively. That was definitely something very funny.
It wasn't funny. And African women are worthy of respect. They're worthy of dignity. They're worthy of honor.
What are some fears that, for you as a person, you carry along?
I fear that
It's Women's Month across the world, and across Africa, we are going to bring you the great conversations about women and how we can improve the lot for women. And today, we have a leader, a woman who's worked with thousands of women and people with disabilities in Cameroon and across Africa. Let us welcome Comfort Mussa.
Thank you very much, Bama. Yeah, it's been how many months of planning to get here?
Too many months for sure.
Yeah, really happy to be present here today.
Great, thank you, and of course, thank you very much for making the time. So it's Women's Month, exciting. I'm sure this is your month. You're excited. What?
Well, I think for me, Women's Day is every day. This is what I do every day. I go out with the same excitement, with the same passion for women's rights. So it's just another month.
Yeah.
But I think the momentum this month is greater because more people are paying attention to the things that we do and say every day.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. That's good to know. And as a woman, right, we live in a world where it's more and more complex to really have these types of discussions because these conversations are becoming much more nuanced. As a woman, what does it mean to be a woman exactly?
Well, for me, to be a woman is, first of all, the biology of it, but more than just the biology. To be a woman is to have strength and softness in one body, is to be this product of society because of your social, your cultural, and your emotional experiences that you're having because of the roles that society has assigned to you, but also because of the roles that you have chosen for yourself. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's what being a woman means to me.
Wow.
It's more than biology. It's social, it's cultural, it's emotional.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really great. I've never looked at it like that, looked at it from the angle of strength and softness at the same time. It's really amazing. And just to look at that a little bit, like it's so difficult to really mix strength and softness at the same time, because for example, if you look at a man, it's all strength, sometimes brute force and all of that. But for a woman, how do you mix strength and softness at the same time?
I mix both because, like I said, for me, to be a woman means I am this product of the experiences I'm living, and my society expects me to be soft. And yes, there is that softness, there's that feminine part, but also every day I have to show up with resilience into spaces that were not constructed for me. And that takes a certain level of strength. So there is a mix of both in me as a woman, as a Cameroonian woman. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really, really great way to look at it. So yeah, you talked about Cameroonian women. I think Cameroonian women are peculiar, and it's Women's Week, of course. We have a lot going on, but I think as a man looking from the outside, sometimes you think that Women's Day is really all about just food, dancing, soulever le kaba, all of that match pass. But I feel that there's more to that discussion. Do you think that there are real issues that we should be discussing instead of some of those that I would say are important, but not as important to the conversation?
First of all, I'm really grateful that you are having this conversation. You're a man, and you've decided to look in and have this conversation during this week. Thank you for this. And also for those who may not be from Cameroon or Africa, we have our context. So in Cameroon, how do we celebrate events, be it sad or joyful? A funeral, a birthday party, ordination in church or baptism. How do we celebrate? With food, with fabric. So our celebrations are always very colorful.
Yeah.
But the color, the food and the choreography shouldn't steal from the focus. Why are we celebrating? And so I understand that women may want to commemorate Women's Day with food and parties because it's cultural to us. But I also know that in our culture, sometimes the business of the day is so important you can't even eat. If there is a funeral and the cause of death is horrible, maybe a child was killed. Sometimes at those funerals, they don't even eat. They say, what are we eating for when we have something grave, on our plate?
Yeah.
So it's not, yes, we celebrate with food, we celebrate with fabrics. There's ashwabi, as we call it here, but it's not every occasion where that is the focus. So even when there is a fabric for a particular funeral, the focus is the grief,
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that over the years in Cameroon, the fabric and the partying has been emphasized over the day. Why do we have Women's Day? And so for me, I don't have a problem with people who choose to buy their fabric, but I have a problem, and I think we need to rethink when it becomes a distraction, when it steals from the day. And also when it becomes a source of inequality. So yes, there is Women's Day and there is a fabric. So all women should wear that as Cameroonian women, but can all Cameroonian women afford it? How much is that fabric? In some shops, 10,000. Some places 15, 20. Yes, there is a set market price. But if you go to the market this week, people are buying that fabric for 15, 20K. How many Cameroonian women can afford this? And how many can afford it every year? And so you now have, especially rural women who cannot afford it. And so is this fabric unifying us? When we use fabrics for social occasions, it's to identify a group. So you go to a wedding and maybe the family of the bride is wearing a particular outfit, and it's usually chosen to make sure it's chosen in a way that everyone in that family can afford. So if we have now chosen Women's Day fabric, and a big portion of this group cannot afford it? Does it unify us, or is it creating the imbalance that we are first of all trying to push against? So that would be my stand on the fabric. Yeah. If it's distracting us, then we have to rethink.
True, very true. For me, I look at it like, it's a bit of a distraction, because there are many bigger issues. There are many problems that women face, which I think we should be putting more on the table.
Yeah.
And I think you talk about those quite a lot. And I just thought, maybe it would be a good idea to hear from you, someone who understands these issues very deeply, who talks to women on a day-to-day basis. What are some of the big problems that you really see women facing, and how do you think those problems could be fixed potentially?
Okay, before I get into that, please permit me say that Women's Day in Cameroon is more than just the fabric and the party.
Yeah.
But what does mainstream media portray? Not all women are about the fabric. Even this week, there are people who are going on online and on air and saying we need to rethink this thing. These are the priorities we need to center. But what are the media narratives? Already in newsrooms, there may be some bosses who are saying, after the Women's Day march past, we want you to go to the hot corners of town and take pictures of the excesses. So again, who is telling the story of Women's Day celebration? Which images are we seeing? We're seeing images from the major cities. How are the women in the rural communities celebrating Women's Day? The approach may be different. This week, as we speak, there are women's groups that are donating to orphanages. In my office, we're working around that. There are women's groups that are repainting classrooms. There are women's groups that are coming together to have financial literacy classes. A lot is happening, but it is not being centered. It is not being captured in mainstream media. So what we see is a narrative that is a danger of a single story. Cameroonian women are doing more than soulever le kaba and eating chicken. There are women that are doing great things, and I really hope that we can also focus on the different ways that women are celebrating or commemorating Women's Month. Now to what should we be focusing on? As a career woman, I would say I am very concerned when many companies use Women's Month to market their services and products more than to reflect on why Women's Day. What does that mean for us?
Yeah.
I mean, for those who are especially in the private sector, but I've seen women in Cameroon go to work. Some women go to work 3 weeks after they've had a baby. Because if you stay longer, you're going to lose your job. Your boss says, it's okay, you can take your time. But if you take too much time, I'm helpless. I need to get someone to fill in.
Yeah.
So you have women who are working in companies without formal contracts. Some of the contracts do not make room for maternity leave. And so this worries me, to know that women constantly have to choose between having a baby and having to work, even when if they choose having the baby, then they don't have the resources to raise the kid. I think Women's Month should be a time when companies really think about this. And in every sector in Cameroon, sexual harassment in the workplace is huge. This is a good time to talk about it. What about the gender policies? What about the safeguarding policies? We even have offices where, some women are in offices where they don't even have separate toilets. And so this is a time for women to think about, what do we want? Because there are offices that do not prioritize women's issues, but they will do so because it's Women's Month, and they will ask women, what do you want? And so if your office asks you, what do you want? I'm not going to tell you what you want because you know what you want. But if you don't have policies that protect you, rushing to say, give us the fabric, give us money to sew, give us chicken, you're living for a day. We need to think about, yes, that could serve you for the 8th of March, but what about the 9th of March? We need to think about, things that last beyond the 9th of March. And there are many areas we can look at. Public leadership in Cameroon. We have never had a female governor in this country. Why? These are inequalities we must look at. You know, there are some ministerial positions that have never been occupied by women. The statistics, I mean, the gap is too wide. This gap needs to be bridged. 50 years ago, it was different. Many women were not in school. But now, year in, year out, we're having more women go to school, perform as well as their male colleagues, sometimes better. But there's some positions that are based on appointments. And some women have never been appointed to these positions. During Women's Month, these are some of the things we're pushing for. To say we need more women in public leadership, not just because, we want to see women there, but we think, I believe that society loses when leadership is not inclusive. Bring women so they can bring another perspective. They can bring another lived experience. But you may say, you don't need to be a woman to decide for women. You need to be a woman sometimes to understand certain things. I give you an example. When we were having COVID, and there was a lockdowns, and there's some people who built, spaces to accommodate women. It had to take other women who were there to think about, okay, what about the menstrual hygiene of women who are going to be here? When people were going for humanitarian outreaches, when the armed conflicts started in the Northwest, most of the humanitarian interventions did not think about dignity kits until we had some activists like Feka Chris of blessed memory, who had to go to the bushes and talk with women and discover some of them were using leaves during their periods. Most men may not think about that. They may not have that reflex because it's not their reality. And so we need more women in public leadership. And by mine, there are, on the aspect of health, we need another podcast to talk about women's health. There are full divisions in Cameroon without a gynecologist.
What? Wow.
You have a whole division without gynecologists. There are many divisions like that. How do the women with complications during pregnancy cope? And that's why you have higher mortality rates in these areas. And it's not just the gynecologist. When you have pediatric needs, it's the same. So we need to think about women's health, especially when it comes to maternal health. If you go to the northern regions, it's a sad tale. And in other divisions, away from the bigger cities. So there are so many things we need to address. And if you, I will end with, if you've been watching news in Cameroon, we're in in March. March is just beginning. But do you know that between February and March, in mainstream media, we have counted at least 15 cases of women that have been killed, often by their partners. This is close to a femicide. We need to talk about protection and safety for the average Cameroonian woman. It is shocking. It is traumatizing to have to read this in the news every day. And then we have Women's Month, and this is not prioritized. So these are some of the things we need to put on the table, not just for Women's Month, but every day. Yeah.
And just today, actually, we have a colleague here who compiles news that happens across the country on a daily basis. And, I saw one of those stories, and it was the story of a woman that has been killed by their partner over an argument for a plate of food, something we can't really understand. And you see
things for some of the most trivial things. And then day in, day out, the stories have become too many that people zap past because it's too shocking, it's too traumatizing. But when we are constantly shocked and traumatized, something happens. There is a numbness. People grow numb. So you hear another woman has been killed. You zap to the next thing. And so when we become numb, we normalize it. And I am afraid we're getting towards that point where it is normal, but it should not be normal that women are losing their lives at this rate, was still at the hands of their partners.
Yeah. So, and I think it boils down to what you touched on earlier about the cultural norms. In our society, we have a lot of, as much as we have all the advanced technology and AI, I think at the roots, our cultures are still quite traditional and conservative. You touched on the fact that there's been no woman appointed governor in this country. The situation of many women maybe in different parts of the country who have a lot of challenges. I think some of this comes back down to our cultural norms, women being oppressed in general. Do you think this is really an issue that we should be looking at more from the cultural lens, and not just from the lens of some of the issues, but more of looking back at the culture, how can we change this, how can we make things better?
Our culture in itself is not inherently oppressive towards women. Culture is beautiful, but sometimes those who interpret our traditions, disfavor women. And so there are things that our ancestors learned and passed on to us, but it is okay to question certain things. And when we question the things that are not serving us, we can change. Culture evolves. Back in the day, we had communities where albinos were killed because people did not understand why you would have people with a different skin color. But we have learned and, changed. There are still communities where you have terrible widowhood practices. But also we have communities like in the Bali, in the Northwest region. A lot has changed, towards protecting the dignity and safety of widows. True, in some communities, it is still, widowhood rights are still very oppressive, but culture evolves. So it is not set in stone. Because our ancestors said a woman must not speak in the room, she should sit at the back, doesn't mean we carry that into our tomorrow. We need to look at what is serving us and keep it, preserve it. I'm African. I'm proud of my culture. I love my culture, but there are other things. No, I'm not taking that with me into my tomorrow. So we need to look at what is serving us and what is not serving us and evolve. Yeah.
And that's something I tell people a whole lot. Like, culture is basically just what we've been doing for a long period of time, maybe 50 years, 100 or hundreds of years. And, our parents, our grandparents have basically internalized that and passed down to us. But it doesn't mean it's set in stone. It means it needs to constantly evolve according to the needs of the time. I think that's definitely very, very important. But do you have some examples of some of these very harmful practices? I know you travel across the country, across Africa. Have you seen some of these types of very harmful cultural stereotypes or cultural practices that really hold women back?
Yes, as I travel around Cameroon, I noticed that especially in the rural areas, child marriages are still common. Child and early marriages are still common. And sometimes those who practice it do not even know that these are kids. There are villages where having a birth certificate is an issue. So you go to a village and you have hundreds of kids and just a handful have birth certificates. In that context, sometimes the parents don't know how old this child is. I tell you, in 2026, I still go to many communities where you ask someone how old they are and they cannot tell you exactly. They say, I think it was when I was born, when this a few months after this chief had passed, and then they put a new one. And so sometimes the parents just look at the body of the girl. Oh, she's developed, her breast is sprouting, so she's started having her period, she's ripe for marriage. There's some cases where the girls actually have their birth certificate and they're sent out for marriage because it's a cultural practice that once you have a girl at a certain size, she should be sent off for marriage. So that's still very common. We still have, like I said, obnoxious practices around widowhood rights. Some widows are still treated really poorly, sometimes even educated women. And when we're talking about these practices, it's not limited to women in rural areas. You could be a lady living in a city and your father's family tells you you have no right to inherit his property, even if he willed it to you. So we've seen it. So when we're talking about these practices, it's not limited to rural areas, but some are more peculiar to rural areas. We still have in the rural areas, many girls do not go to school because it's considered a waste of time. They have to stay home and take care of their younger siblings or cook for the family. Why are you going to school if they're preparing you for marriage? This is still very common. And then I have seen cases in Cameroon where there are villages where a girl is raped, and then the family tells her she has to marry the man who raped her, and they think they are punishing the man. Like, you thought you would deflower her and then nobody will come, so you must marry her. I have actually interviewed women like this, and it breaks my heart to see this happening. You don't punish a rapist by letting him marry the survivor. But this still happens. And how do you explain it? But the family, they'll say, no, this thing is shameful. No one will ever look at our daughter. So, and so this is still happening in many communities. And we could go on and on about some of these cultural practices that need to be reviewed. And some of these practices we just need to totally abandon and move on. Yeah. So that we can have more safety, more dignity, and equality for the women and the girls in these communities.
Yeah, those are really tough experiences that many people have to live through. I think it's quite sad, especially like you said, in many remote communities, rural areas, this still goes on. Do you think there's a role there for, policymakers, for governments to be able to take a more tougher stance towards some of these issues? Because of course, at the end of the day, advocacy and sensitization can only go so far. At some point, the stick will need to come in to say, hey, we can't do this is against the law and all of that. Do you think there's a role for policymakers and governments to do that?
Definitely, we need policy has a big role to play when it comes to enforcing the rights and protecting women in Cameroon. But we also have a culture of silence in Cameroon. And so when you go through abuse, be it at work, be it in your church, be it in your community, people often teach you to be quiet. They may say, no, don't talk. If you talk, you'll get into trouble. So there are many women in the towns, in churches, and offices where you're being abused. You know that this thing is wrong. But if you dare to complain, those who love you will say, please, for your own good, don't talk. So there is a culture of silence, and this culture of silence is learned. People constantly advising you not to talk, because if you talk, then you may get into trouble. Why do we advise people to be quiet? Why does speaking up amount to trouble? Is there enough protection? Now we're talking about policy for victims and survivors. Yes, in our law, rape, for example, is penalized. But do you know how long it takes sometimes when you go and report a rape case? How long it takes before it's followed up? I've seen girls. I mean, I happen to also be in a situation where people may call sometimes and say, this is happening. What can we do? Can you refer? Where can we go to for help? Because we talk about this thing often. We talk about these things often. People get into your inbox, they would write, they will call. And so I have had to take some girls to the hospitals because they were raped. And then the procedure can discourage you who is going to report. Even when you report, how long does it take? A girl is raped, maybe she gets pregnant, and then you start following to make sure that the rapist is prosecuted. Sometimes before you know it, you have a long pregnancy and the guy has not even been held, So we need stronger enforcement of the law, and also more timely. Often for the cases we're talking about earlier about women who have been killed in Cameroon, when you hear the stories, they say it didn't start today. This guy has been beating this woman. Maybe she reported to her family. Maybe she reported to her quarter head, or maybe she went to the police station. Why does it not stop? Why does it continue until the woman dies? Because there's a certain level of laxity. And so, yes, we have strong laws, but we hope that there's a more stringent enforcement, and that women can get to trust the system, to know that, yes, if I speak up, there's a law to protect me when I do and even after I do. We have good laws in Cameroon. We just pray for more stringent and also quicker enforcement of these laws when it comes to protecting women. Yeah, and also making it more accessible, because I remember there was a time someone called me and said there is a girl with speech impairments, also hard of hearing, who was raped, and they wanted to go to a police station and they didn't know how to communicate with a police officer. So they needed recommendations for me to get someone who could do sign language. But that is a service that is paid. So they have to pay this person to take the person to the police station to report. And so there's also, when it comes to access to justice, there's another level that maybe impedes women with disabilities that our policymakers need to take into consideration to make sure that it's accessible to all women, literate, illiterate, in urban, in rural areas, women with disabilities, women without disabilities.
So I have a theory regarding this, right? And this is a bit controversial. I think the enforcement is so lax because those who enforce the laws are maybe themselves sometimes culpable in some of these things. Would you agree with that line of thought?
I would say again, it's culture and it's what we normalize. So I once interviewed a woman who said she was beaten by her husband, and when she went to report, she went to a police station, or I think it was a gendarmerie, and when she reported, the people there said, So they just slap you like that, you ran to the gendarmerie. They made light of. The guy had, I don't know how many slaps, but she rushed to report. And then they said, simple slap like that, madam, and you're already bringing your husband to the gendarmerie. Go home and settle. I don't know the background, but of the officer who addressed it, but they made light of it and then they sent her home. And so she was sharing the experience with other women and said, I can go even if it's more serious. But, there's a certain cultural perspective to that, because you have women who maybe their husband has beaten them and then they rush to their family for safety. And then the family say, no, you go back there. When we're growing up, I don't know if you knew the song, Femme, il faut supporter. Supporter, c'est le mariage.
Yeah.
So that's a cultural part. In songs, in stories, in jokes, we are told you need to endure. So go back. If you have an officer who is supposed to enforce the law, who has grown up in a culture that says you have to support, you have to endure, If you bring a case to the person may say, look, and sometimes they're giving that advice from their heart to say, madam, you can't start reporting your husband, or go back. Don't write this thing. And so there's also, we have these policies in a cultural setting that we need to address, so that people know that, yes, a woman has a right to seek help. And if she's been beaten, there's nothing as small beating or big beating. Violence is violence. It grows. If you tolerate the small one, it grows into a bigger one. And the next day we have the kind of news articles we're seeing daily in Cameroon. Yeah.
Yeah. That's really the case. I think in many instances, people minimize some of these issues and really until it's too late. Of course, like you see, maybe a small slap today, but then tomorrow you hear someone is dead from these types of cases. Mm-hmm. But in your line of work, working with some of these women, do you hear like the opposite of that story? For example, men who are supportive of women and helping out, because of course, as you know, in many cases men are also allies and they do their best to support women. Do you have some of these types of cases as well?
I have so many men who are allies, who understand what needs to be done and are working hard to make sure it happens. My father, for example, if there is a rape case in our village today and he hears about, he will call me in the night and say, look, this is what's happening. And we talk about it. We discuss strategy. I have been, I visited my village one time on holidays, and my father took a child who had been raped to the hospital to establish her medical certificate. I didn't know I had come when he was already following that case. I usually say when it comes to the advocacy and the drive to be my full self unapologetically, he encouraged that. So he's an ally in that sense. I have men who are my coaches, who are my mentors, who believe in this, who are encouraging women to speak up, seek help, and so there are many men in Cameroon who know the importance of protecting women, of supporting this cause, who are allies. Here you are, Bamai, having this conversation with us. So yes, there are many men in Cameroon, and we appreciate what they're doing. That support is important because sometimes the men will listen to other men more than they may to the women because of, again, our context. Yeah,
that's so true. I think it's good to point out those men that are doing a great job. But for my end, I'm always very hard on the men because of course we have to make sure that we're taking accountability. We're doing what we need to do. And like you said, in many of the examples that you've given, it's it's a lot of men, a lot of sexual violence being involved. Do you think that is an indicator that maybe we have a problem in terms of male sexual discipline, that those types of cases always keep coming up quite regularly? Do you think we have that problem as a society?
Discipline.
Yeah.
And there is a sense of possession that some men think that women belong to them, and you can't say no. Because what gives you that audacity that a woman is going through Mashe Mokolo and you can just slap her butt? There's a certain audacity, like you're a man, so you can do what you want. You can touch a woman anywhere you want. And sometimes these men do not even expect that the woman can say no. And so when you say no, maybe you're an intern and a boss makes an advance and you say no, they'll be like, do you know who I am? Do you know what I can do for you? So there's this false sense of possession, like men think that the women belongs to them. And some of them even stupidly misquote the Bible and say, oh, you have to submit. Nonsense. It's nonsense. The Bible doesn't ask all women to submit to all men. And so you see that there's just, it's a lot of stupidity, that men expect that they own you because you're a woman in their space. They can talk to you the way they want. They can touch you the way they want. And then if you say no, they use force. So there is need for discipline. There is need for more sensible, more mature, more disciplined men to talk to other men. There are many young boys that have not been mentored, that have not been taught how to respect women, that have not been taught how to respect themselves. In churches, online, every day you're seeing all these webinars, all these programs, women, how to be decent, how to be responsible. There are all these programs that are preparing women, perhaps for marriage, perhaps for relationships, perhaps for beautiful careers, but you don't see that many programs preparing young men for the life that they need to live. And so there is need for more mentorship, more training of our young men. Yeah.
Wow, that really sparks a lot of ideas in me, because I think that's quite important. For someone like myself, I really understand how important that discipline is. As a young man, you're growing up, you see the world from a lens. You think maybe everything is about using force and pushing, like you said, but you have to really think of how do you take all of the energy that you have that you can use and then channel it into more productive activities that can be more beneficial to the society. I think definitely we need more men doing that. That's a whole full-time activity that someone needs to get on to ensure that many more people are being educated in that line, so that we have less of those type of cases of sexual violence on women and things like that.
I think so, and also the stories that we tell. What are the stories that we tell? What are we telling young boys? Oh, all African men behave like this. All African men, you've heard this thing that people say, all African men are polygamous. All African men are this. Again, that's a very dangerous narrative. We need to teach our young boys, give them a full picture. Yes, in Africa, there are some men that are polygamous, but there are other men that are monogamous. Yes, as a man, you can take no for an answer. There's a way. So we also need to rethink the stories that we're telling young boys, rethink the images that we're portraying. I mean, when you watch music videos, when you watch online content, it prepares some of these boys for violence subtly. You need to evaluate our content and ask yourself, what are our young men consuming? What are we preparing them for? Yeah.
And of course, that's the basis for every strong family, because someone that I think the institution of family is actually quite important. And of course, if you don't have a disciplined young man who would build himself up into something good for the society, who would build maybe a business, build a family, get married, you will not be able to have that family structure where you can raise another young boy who will come out of that and be even better. So I really think that's quite important. But looking generally at what happens today, you have a lot of dysfunctional families. I would say this is what I see, looking from the outside on many relationships, and it's something that really worries me. I look around and I think the families of the future are in trouble, because you have a lot of these negative echo chambers online, people pushing out all those stories, all those narratives of negative days, how this bad thing has happened, men are terrible, everybody is terrible. And what do you think about that?
I think that if you're going to sit online and take in everything about family, you're setting yourself up for trouble, because too many people are speaking from their own experience, and some of them are speaking from a very unhealthy place. So if you go online and you consume content that tells you at the end of the day that men are terrible, and you internalize that, you will approach men from a very unhealthy place. And so I would say be very careful and selective with what you consume online, especially when it comes to the things that form your impressions and inform your values about family. There are many people in our communities that we can learn from. You need to investigate who is talking to you to be sure that what they're teaching you is right. Yeah.
Wow, that's powerful. I think definitely in terms of social media specifically, looking at all the content that we consume, right? All the content that we consume, and like I was talking to you about earlier, it's become more of a marketplace for negativity, and that really worries me. You have young men who are pushing out a lot of negative narratives, young women who are also pushing out negative narratives in terms, especially, I think for me, it's really especially around making relationships transactional, as in, men and women, everything is transactional. You hear things like, I can't date a broke man, or I do, and then, that really goes into a situation where you have a lot of women, a lot of young girls who who I think are pushed into the idea that, you know, you need a man with a Range Rover before, or you need to cry in a private jet, for example, because, you know, someone with money is the only person that you should date. Do you see that a lot happening?
Yes. Is there a lot of content like this online? Yes, there is. Do I consume a lot of this? No. Again, I'm very selective with what I consume online. My feeds are really curated. But these people that are speaking online and saying it's better to cry in a private jet than to cry in a bike, or to cry on a bike. For context, yes, it may make sense to cry in a private jet than on a bike, so it's okay. But what is the bigger picture behind that? Are you saying if you're being abused, you should endure abuse if it makes you cry in a private jet? Look, whether you cry in a private jet or you cry on a bike, you're crying. It's pain. Mm-hmm. And so pain should not be glamorized because it's on a private jet. Abuse should not be tolerated because you're going to cry on a mattress and another person will cry on the floor. And so at the end of the day, we need to go beyond the sound bites. What are they really saying? And make informed choices for yourself. I mean, if Mama, if I ask you, do you want us to have this program in a private jet or in a smoke-filled firewood kitchen somewhere? Of course, private jet, but it's not about private jet or motorbike.
Yeah,
it's about the abuse. So we need to center the main issues and again, not be distracted. Yeah.
For sure. I think abuse is a big issue, and as you would have obviously seen recently, we also have, I think, especially in our environment, a lot of people who maybe minimize this abuse or promote this abuse. We had a certain mayor who came out and really put out some messaging, put out a video, saying men have the right to have a password, but women don't, so I guess your husband should check your phone and make sure that you're controlled effectively. I think that was definitely something very funny.
It wasn't funny.
Yeah.
Because it was serious business. It was official business.
Mm-hmm. From the mayor, yes.
National colors.
Yes.
So it wasn't a prank. It would have been good if it was a prank, maybe. But it wasn't a prank and it wasn't a joke. So it's not funny. Mm-hmm. And that is the kind of culture we're talking about. That kind of narrative enforces the fact that privacy works well for men, but women do not need privacy at a time when we're looking at digital protection, digital literacy. Women have a lot to protect on their phones. There is data about your job, your bank, your numbers. Mm-hmm. Yes, you have a right to protect that. So I think that went against the progress that we're making in terms of digital literacy and protection for women and men. And if you are married to a man, what is good for the goose is good for the gander. If you should protect your phone, your wife should protect hers. But if a couple decides that, look, in our own house, this is how we want to do it, it's different. But having an official say we are advising men to do this and women not to do this, and then you invite us to bring our opinions into it. If you're doing it in your home, in the private and comfort of your home, no one needs to intervene. But if you're going to wear our national colors and advise men, then as Cameroonian women, we will say, but privacy is important for women too, because yes, we have things to protect on our devices.
Yeah, for sure. I think privacy cuts across the board, and it's not just like you said, it's data, it's all the information. It's maybe a career woman who works, maybe you're someone who does business, does transactions.
Your kids, you need to protect that.
Yes.
For example, so there's a lot that women have to protect. But if a woman chooses not to put a password on her phone, it should be because she chose not to. Not because, men have been advised and this is 2026. I can't imagine we're having this kind of conversation about should women protect their phones or not. Let them not take us back.
it's a difficult conversation.
forward,
Yeah, for sure.
Takes us back. At
Yeah.
a time when it's digital security, people are thinking, should we store things in cloud or this? And then we're coming back to password on phones, please.
Yeah. And I think the big issue is coming from a female leader, someone who is normally supposed to be an opinion leader amongst women. It makes it even more difficult because then maybe you would expect a man to, want to really focus on the side of men and all of that. But then coming from a woman's perspective,
Advice was to men, but do you take it? Do you take that advice to put your password and your wife? So the advice was to men, and the men are saying no, thank you.
yeah.
So the men have rejected the advice. Well, let's move on.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's very true. You're a professional. You work with women. You work with people with disabilities, and of course, you try to break a lot of stereotypes around these issues. But what are some barriers that you find as you go on a daily basis with your work? Do you, of course, your ideas are unconventional. Do people say you want to be like white man? You want to be doing like white people and all of that? Do you face that a lot in your day-to-day work?
I do. There are times when you say something and people are like, no breeder, white man teen for here. But I always say that safety, dignity, equality is not Western. It is human. And it is the debris, the residue that was left from colonialism that still makes people think that a woman who wants respect, who wants safety, who wants progress is Western. For me, that is colonial mentality. It's not Western. It's human. And so that's all I can say to people who think that women who want more for themselves, women who are talking about progress are being Western. It's African. It's human. Yeah. And African women are worthy of respect. They're worthy of dignity. They're worthy of honor in their own right as women. It doesn't need to be a Western concept because it is not. And that's why even in Africa, we have the African Feminist Charter, which, this is what African women want for themselves. So if you're out there thinking that, a woman who wants to go to school a lot, a woman who's talking about money or buying her own land, a woman who is talking about equality is being Western, you need to get out of that colonial style of thinking. It's human. Basic human rights. Yeah.
I agree totally.
So yes, I get it a lot, but it's always an opportunity to educate people. It's like hand washing.
Yeah.
Just wash your hands, and then they'll say, no, black man no they die dirty. No, cholera, diarrhea. You will die if you know.
Yeah.
So it's Western. So we need to really let go of some of the things that colonialism taught us.
Yeah.
And just value African women enough, value Cameroonian women enough to understand that this is what they want for themselves. But if you still choose not to see it, that is your problem, because this generation of women are not waiting for permission. They're not waiting for your permission to seek their safety, to want progress and go after it. They're going ahead regardless. So you need to catch up by letting go of that colonial mentality. Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree. And as yourself, as Comfort Mussa, who does all this work for women, like what are some fears that for you as a person you carry along on a day-to-day in the context of your work?
I fear that I'm not doing enough. This is something that sometimes I lose sleep over because I see the need. You need to go around this country and see how many girls are still not going to school. When I'm in the field on a school day and I see so many girls, in the villages, and they're not going to school, it breaks my heart. And then you see the women that are going through abuse, Like you interview a woman who says, I'm married to this man because he raped me and my family had to ask him to come take me. These stories break my heart, and I know I can only do so much as Comfort and sometimes with our platform Sister Speak. And so it bothers me that sometimes I'm afraid that am I doing enough, because there is so much more we could do. And so that's something I constantly worry about and fear that will we rise to the occasion and do all that is required of us. So the work is massive, but I'm also learning that I can only do so much because I'm one person, and if I'm able to help one girl, if that's what I can do per time, is enough. So yes, that is something I'm constantly dealing with. When I'm a journalist, so I consume a lot of local news. And you're seeing the need, and you're like, oh my God, we need to talk about this. We need to produce more documentaries. We need to write more. We need to engage more women, because I believe that, like we say in Pidgin, that Tori de bring Tori. When you have these conversations, you spark more. Just having this conversation with you, there are people who will agree with what we're saying. There are people who will disagree, and that's okay, because then we are having more conversations. So I lose sleep over the scope of what is yet to be done.
That's so true. I think there's just the needs are massive compared to the actions that are being taken. I think the needs at all levels are massive, and I really hope that with people like yourself, with others who are in the same line of work, trying to help women, trying to help society as a whole, we are able to do a lot more. I definitely hope for that. And in terms of looking at women, how things used to be versus now, of course there are all the different generations, the millennials, which are of course that's our generation, but you have younger people now, younger women, Gen Zs. Do you see a lot of progress in terms of these different generations of women, how they've been able to move from one generation, our parents' generations, now to our generation, and then the Gen Z generation, the younger people who are coming up even more strongly?
I see, not so much a lot of synergy between the different generations, but something I do as an individual is I connect with the women that came before us. I love talking with the older women, the mothers that are in their 80s, in their 90s, in their 70s. They have a wealth of information and experience that we do not have, even with AI and the internet. So we need to communicate with them. We need to learn from them. And because we are just following in the paths that, the blaze, but what were their challenges? What were their strengths? What did they learn? And there is a gap. There are many young girls that don't even know how their fathers met their mothers. What was the experience? What was, what has been handed down to you? Where are you coming from? What are you building on? And so there is a need for this transfer of information. You see how we usually say, oh, some girls have their first period without even having learned about periods, because maybe the mothers do not talk with their daughters, and then the daughters are forced to talk with their friends about periods and maybe about boyfriends, and they may make mistakes. There are women in their 30s, some in their 40s, who do not know what, for example, menopause is. And they've not had to talk with an older women about, because people are having these conversations within their age groups. And so there is a need for this intergenerational mix, so that this knowledge is handed down. It mustn't be by you talking. If you don't have an older woman, you can call. There are podcasts, there are stories, there are movies, there are documentations that you can learn from. And so, yes, I make a lot of friends with older women, and I try to connect a lot with Gen Zs. I have younger Gen Z friends, and then you begin to see the differences. That look, these Gen Zs, they are not prioritizing some of the things that we prioritize. They have another way of looking at the world, because of course your time is different, but there's a lot I am learning from them. And I know that there are things they too are learning from me and the women in my own generation. So yeah, it's important to keep having that intergenerational exchange.
For sure. I think it's incredibly important seeing that change. I think for me, when I look at that generational shift, I think I see women a lot more, younger women, especially the next generation, a lot more liberated, a lot more open, a lot more willing to discuss all the taboo topics that when we were growing up as millennials, it was really you couldn't have any conversations around that. And of course, people who are sometimes being raised by the internet in a way, before your mother is even able to tell you about periods, you've been on Google, you have everything, and sometimes you maybe know more than her a little bit. So I think it's really it's really that, and I think it's progress. I think it's really amazing.
And I also love that we're having older women take up space online. I love it. When you see our mothers, our grandmothers, some of them are on Facebook, some of them are on TikTok, sending out videos. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful mix, and we can have more grounded lessons. It's important to know where you come from.
True.
Last year I challenged some women when they were celebrating Women's Day, and I said, who were the women that paved the way for us as younger Cameroonian women? Who were the women 30 years ago who fought for our rights? What were they saying? What were their challenges? And people were, But they were women before us. They had tough fights for us to be here. I mean, but there was a time in this country where if you're a married woman, you could not travel out of the country without consent of your husband. How did that change? Who are the women who fought for this? And so Women's Day, even if you're Gen Z or you're millennial, what are we celebrating? Which progress are we celebrating? Which efforts brought us to this place? And so, I'm just talking about 20 years ago. It's not a long time ago. 30 years ago, we can still interview some of them. But do we know them? Do we know what they had to overcome for us to be here talking like this? And so I think even as with all the excitement, we need to take a step back. Some of these women are still important. We need to know. Yes, there's no female governor. We've not had a prime minister. But who were the first female parliamentarians? What was it like for them to get into parliament? Because even 30, 40 years later, access is still very difficult. But if we don't know where we're coming from, it may be difficult to make progress. So yes, the Gen Zs and the millennials, we have a lot of information at our hands, at our fingertips, but we're coming from somewhere. And if I could challenge young women this Women's Month, it will be to look back. Do you know the stories and the victories that the women that came before you recorded? Do you know about when I learned about my grandmother, my great-grandmother, it challenged me to do my advocacy for persons with disabilities. And that was around 2013, 2014, when I learned that my great-grandmother was crippled, but she didn't have a wheelchair back in the day. And so she had all her kids crawling. I didn't know. But when I heard that, and then I started asking my parents, but how did she do it? What was she called? What were her challenges? How did she raise her kids? And so it made sense to me that my heart always beat for persons with disabilities. And the more I asked these questions, the more I understood that even my grandmother had her child who did not walk up till maybe the age of 8, 9, because of the polio vaccine thing, and she had to carry her on her back and did not go and throw the child like people would advise in the village back in the day, made sure she went to school. That is my aunt, who is an amazing nurse and community leader today. But imagine if I did not know these stories. Knowing the stories, digging deep into it, felt something about my passion for the advocacy I do for persons with disabilities. I was just interested in this thing, but I didn't know that 2 generations of women before me worked in this. So we need to know. If you are in law, don't just say, female lawyers. Just take a step back. You will be amazed what you uncover. And so there is need for us to look back so we can go even further. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it comes back to, you know, us being able to tell our stories. I don't think we're telling our stories enough.
Yeah.
I don't think we're celebrating our heroes, those who came before us enough, both women, the men, those who have been able to do a lot for us as a people, as a community, whether it's the Cameroonian community or, you know, as an African community as a whole. We're not doing a lot more of that. And I think that's why the work that you do as a journalist, as a storyteller is really so important, to be able to, you know, document a lot of these issues, document where did we come from, what are the things that have happened. And I think, definitely, even for me, this is something that we should be doing a lot more.
We need to, because also their wins are our wins. If we forget about the victories and the points that our grandmothers scored, even if they didn't go to school, there were battles they fought and they won. What were their strategies? We need to count it. I like what Oprah Winfrey says, that sometimes when she moves into a room and it's a new space, she says, I come as one, but I stand as 1,000, because she's counting. You may have taken 2 steps to get into the room, but you built on the 500 steps of many other people that brought you to that place where you could take 2 steps to get into a room. And so for me, I'm a storyteller today, and the force and the energy, where is it coming from? I still carry the pictures on my phones, on my cameras, of my mentors, of Ansang. And then I talk to some young journalists, and like, do you know Ansang? They don't know Ansang. I'm like, my God, it's less than 20. How can you not know Ansang? I literally still have her pictures. I look at her and I'm like, if we are here, it's because there was an Ansang. And if other people come after me, it's because an Ansang blazed the trails for me. And I saw what Ansang did for me, and I believe in what I can do for other girls. It would be a shame if these other girls do not know Ansang. When I started radio, I needed to dig deep. Who were the women that shook the airwaves of Radio Cameroon back in the day? Like Marsha, she's still alive. It would be a shame for women in radio to talk about rights and progress if they don't tap from women like Marsha. How did you do it? How, you know? And so there is a lot of learning, and it's exciting. You see, I get excited even just talking about these women.
Yeah.
Because we are standing on their shoulders. We are standing on that progress. So what are we celebrating in Women's Month is progress. But what progress? What are we commemorating is the possibility. So the progress is for the women who came before us, and how their actions and our actions have brought us to this place. But then we're dreaming about another future that will deliver more for the girls that come after us. Yeah.
For sure, be able to deliver more. I think that's a great way to end the conversation. Comfort, thank you so much for all the advice that you've been able to pass across to young girls, to men, or to us as well as men, to support women. And for this Women's Month, I think it's really timely to be able to make sure that we get that message out there on women and the conversations that we need to be having to support women. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and a joyful and thoughtful Women's Month to all the women that are watching the podcast today.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching this episode of the Biig Africa Podcast. Please remember to subscribe to the channel so that we can continue to bring you amazing guests who can share their knowledge and help you get to where you want to go in your life. Thank you very much, and please join us on the next episode of the Biig Africa Podcast.